that's coming out of that waste valve is very green, and you can see the water that's coming out of the bleeder valve is clear spring water. Alright, so this is the double acting ram pump that I described how it works in the overview video on double acting ram pumps. Basically, like I said in the video, this is very similar to a single acting ram pump, which is basically where you have your inlet supply, shutoff valve, waste valve, comes up to the inside valve, and then it goes directly to pressure tank, and then of course you have the delivery line. So this is basically the general setup of a single acting ram pump, and then you bring double acting into it, which is where you bring a secondary inlet supply of clean drinking water, such as from a spring. This would be creek water, and this is spring water. Now I'm going to be going ahead and replacing this check valve with a brass one, because this is what I want to use anyway. I don't want to use PVC. But we'll go ahead and do that in this video real quick and show you how it's supposed to be set up with the spring in there and why it's supposed to be set up like that. And of course you have your inlet supply to the actual pump. This inlet is directly underneath this valve seat. It has to be as close as possible as close as you can to underneath that valve. And you're going to want to install it with the arrow facing forward toward the pump, so that it's it can freely flow open, and then when that shock wave gets sent through the pump, it'll shut the check valve closed and not allow any water to come past this point, and then it'll start flowing again when it opens back up. So we'll go ahead and install this. So we got that valve back in there. I've explained kind of sort of how it works. A couple of the requirements. We'll go ahead and cut this open. I already know that it's going to be about halfway open, just from testing it before. We got our spring water coming out of the standpipe here, and so that means that there's spring water coming all the way through in the pump already. We'll go ahead and open our creek supply and start the pump. That's how you start it. What we're going to do for the test is, when I start to see colored dye coming out of the waste valve, because my supply line is over 600 feet long, so I think I'm going to get my wife to pour in some dye at the inlet. I'm going to be down here waiting. As soon as I see it coming out of the waste valve, I'll crack that bleeder valve right there. If that's totally clear, then I could guarantee that there is no creek water getting into my pressure tank, which would then get into my delivery pipe. Okay, so my wife is at the inlet pouring dye in. So I'm going to not waste any time here and get this thing running. Just like that. And I got my pliers ready for this bleeder valve. And now we wait. So hopefully you can see in the video, but the water that's coming out of that waste valve is very green. And you can see the water that's coming out of the bleeder valve is perfectly white. See how green that water is? And that bleeder valve is clear spring water. probably going to get clear in a second. So obviously all the water that's coming into this chamber and getting put into the pressure tank is going to be pure, clear spring water. Everything that's in the pipe in the creek is dyed green. I went ahead and stopped the pump. There's still dye in the creek water drive line right now, so it should still be sitting there for me to start the pump again. But what I did is I loosened up this union on the pressure chamber side. So obviously when the pump was running, you could see that the water that was coming out directly under this valve, which allows water into the tank, it was coming out clear. So that's pretty good proof that it's going to be only spring water coming into my tank. But to further prove it, I cracked this union right here. Really, I should have a valve right here I can open and close, but I went ahead and cracked the union, and I'm going to go ahead and run the pump again and let that spurt out water directly from the chamber, which is coming directly to the delivery line, which is the important part. And hopefully we'll see that the water is perfectly clear and the waste valve water is still dyed green. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the pump again. I don't think there's a lot more dye in the line because I let it run for a good minute. But I'm going to crack the union, like I said, and hopefully we'll see only clear water coming out, and we'll see the dye coming out of the waste valve again. This is going to be pretty much absolute proof that this is double acting and it's working properly. So you want to start with the spring line first. Close your waste valve. Open the creek water and we'll start it up. And it's got to build pressure again. So if you're looking, and it needs to build pressure back up. That's why it's stopping, but because I've let this line leak pretty good. But you can see this is clear water coming out of here. Clear spring water, and this is still dye. This is pumping pure spring water right here. It looks like our dye is pretty much running out now. That's pretty much all of it, but hopefully this is some good proof that this is actually working properly. And I'll go ahead and stop that.